Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm absolutely honored to introduce you all to satanic ritual abuse, mind control, and organized trafficking survivor and whistleblower, loving mother, brilliant writer and storyteller on Substack, mental health advocate, spiritual wellness connoisseur, conspiracy theory enthusiast, and my dear friend, Jessica Kaitlin. When I first met Jessica months ago, her sheer strength, light she embodied, and the fragments of her story she shared left me utterly amazed. Though she couldn't speak out publicly at first, our bond grew, leading me to anonymously feature her in 2 Substack articles and then leading into anonymous articles, gently introducing her harrowing experiences in writing to the world. After months of deepening our friendship, I was profoundly moved when she messaged me, "I'm ready to share my story on your podcast." Witnessing Jessica's growth over this past year has been nothing short of miraculous, and I'm deeply honored to introduce you to this extraordinary survivor and warrior. A glimpse into Jessica's journey and what we'll be discussing today. Born into a legacy of pain, with both families marked by generations of incest and abuse, Jessica's life began under the shadow of trauma. Conceived from a teenage pregnancy within a family that perpetuated child trafficking, she faced molestation, grooming, and psychological torment from her earliest years. At 4 years old, after revealing abuse by an uncle, Jessica was removed from her father's home, yet the connection was never fully severed, leaving Jessica with a very fractured and poorly put together collaboration of dissociative identity alters. Despite a mother dissociated from her own past abuse and being forced onto the streets at age 15, Jessica's spirit remained unbroken, and she has been on a dedicated healing journey ever since. She embarked on a fierce journey of healing, diving deep into the realms of mental health, conspiracy theories, spiritual warfare, and healing practices. Today, Jessica stands as a passionate advocate, educating others on child sexual abuse, dissociative identity disorder, the dark mechanisms of evil, and the empowering truth of our divine heritage as children of a loving Creator. Her story is not just one of survival, but of transformation, empowerment, and the relentless pursuit of light in the darkest of places. Jessica's bravery and courage in being capable of sharing her testimony with such raw vulnerability is beyond heroic. Her resilience and strength at such a young age are awe-inspiring. She has become the protector she never had, and a beacon of hope for those who need one the most. I urge you to please set aside everything else that you're doing and lend your full attention to this incredible warrioress. Prepare to be moved by the story of a walking miracle, sharing her experiences not just for healing, but to transform the world into a safer, more compassionate, and more understanding place for all humans and children. Before wrapping up the introduction of today's guests, I'd like to share just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, sharing any information privately with me, or submitting a written testimony for my upcoming book series, or to be featured on a Substack article, you can reach out to me via email at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com or standbysurvivors@protonmail.com. Additionally, I've teamed up with a couple of my favorite brands to offer you exclusive discount codes on products I love, including Rife Technology frequency machines and CZTL's premium methylene blue. You can find all the relevant links and codes along with other resources in the show notes. Your support across all platforms is greatly appreciated, especially as I've had to shift to alternative streaming platforms such as Rumble and X following the termination of my former YouTube channel. I've just started a new YouTube channel. You can subscribe to me at the handle at Imagination Podcast Official that I will be rebuilding as well. This transition to multiple platforms is crucial to continue sharing vital information with the public and the disclosure community. Thank you all wholeheartedly for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. Your support means the absolute world to me. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, survivor, overcomer, walking miracle, fierce mama bear, survivor advocate, my dear friend, and a passionate activist and warrior, educating on exposing the truth about CSA, DID, the functionings of the kingdom of Satan, and to remind us all of the power and authority we hold as children of a loving creator, the one, the only, Jessica Kaitlin. Jessica, thank you so much for being here with us today. What an honor it is to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. I was telling you right before we got on, I feel like I already know you just because, we've built a friendship over the past, however many months it's been. And this is actually the first time today that I get to meet you face to face too. So it's really special that I get to share this experience with everybody else because you really are just such a bright light, and it's been amazing watching your journey into blossoming into tiptoeing into disclosure and feeling passionate about sharing some of these really hard things that you went through with the world to getting a message saying, okay, I'm ready to do a podcast. It's a really big step. So I'm so proud of you. I'm so honored to have you here. I'm absolutely amazed and blown away by you. And I am just, I'm really excited in a very heartfelt way that we get to have difficult conversations with the understanding that it's going to not only benefit the people on the other side of the screen, but we're going to make a difference for generations to come. So I wanted to start by asking you about some of your journey going public with this. You're very young. I know there's a lot of people on the other side of the screen that can't wait to be there, and they're feeling really scared and maybe don't know where to start. And I think it's really inspiring to have watched your journey. So what inspired you to want to go public? And can you talk a little bit about the journey leading into that and sort of what you went through emotionally and how you did it?
I guess the core belief is that we just need to be a light in the darkness. And if we're not like looking into these places and we're not speaking about it, then how is it ever going to be exposed and change? And I understand that it's very hard for a lot of people to digest, but when we look at the reality of what's actually happening to children and what survivors are having to deal with, just to get by life afterwards. These people deserve to be held and to be understood. And when dissociative identity disorder is so rampant and so unknown and taboo and misunderstood, I just can't shake that feeling that it's just something that really needs to be talked about because I see it around me so much and I see it hurting so many people, people that have DID and don't have any remembrance of that trauma and the pain it causes them and their loved ones. And just, I have such a heart for people. And I just want to share my experiences to help other people validate their own and give them a context and a framework of understanding so that they can go through that journey of healing and understanding themselves, and when the trauma arises actually knowing that there's someone that they can talk to have a safe place to process all of that, because I get that it can feel so isolating and like nobody else is experiencing it, but there unfortunately are so many of us, and everyone deserves to be held in that.
And one of the ways that you did that is through writing, and you are an absolutely brilliant writer. And I wanted to talk and share a little bit about this because sort of how this started was you offered to write some articles. You weren't ready to come on screen yet and be fully known. So we did sort of a partial anonymous way where we still shared your name, but we didn't show your face. We didn't share, super personal information about where people can, find you. And at first, you didn't have a Substack where you were, actively sharing yourself. This sort of was something that you grew into. So I wanted to talk about that. What was your journey like writing, and how did you decide to go that route of all the different ways that you could disclose? And let's talk a little bit about your Substack. And I'm going to actually, as you're sort of talking about this, I'm going to bring up some of the articles that we've done together, and kind of, if people follow me on Substack, it'll might like ring a bell for them and be like, oh, I remember hearing about Jessica. Like I saw her name in your Substack. I didn't realize that was who this is. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I would love for people to go subscribe to you. And we also have sort of like a little gift announcement of a project that you just put together actually this weekend that we're recording, to sort of announce to the audience listening here today for them to go check out.
So, writing was just part of the healing process and journey for me. So, I can't remember which one. I think the Halloween story that I shared on there was something that I wrote many years ago now, because it was just the yeah, the process I was using for being able to process the flashbacks that were coming up, and the more recent ones that I've written. I found it so fascinating in the way that over the last few years I've processed different flashbacks and aspects of the whole ritual. And then because flashbacks are so sensory and they can be isolated, it doesn't really give you a solid story. So I find it really incredible the states I'm able to get into when I'm writing. It's just like I'm able to view that memory and just starts flooding out, and I just write, and all of the different flashbacks that I've processed are all just starting to piece together, and it's like, oh, that's what happened, and then it led into that. And it doesn't feel like a super overwhelming experience because I've already processed all of these incremental like flashbacks over the years. So I quite appreciate being able to look at it afterwards and just seeing the full story of what happened. But at the same time, it's very difficult for me to go back and look at, because it is like throwing myself straight into a flashback. So I have to be careful even reading my own writing, because yeah, it's very intense.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I thought was just incredible that you did was you really did just pour the whole experience on the page. There wasn't censorship. You talked very raw about your emotions, about the details, about what you were feeling. It was like reliving it with you in those articles, and they deeply touched me. And from the comments that other people had, it deeply touched a lot of people that listened. It reminds me, if people have watched my podcast and have heard Carrie Olahe speak, she's another younger survivor, another incredible female warrior. And Carrie also is just, no holds bar on what she's, sort of willing to say in that sense. When she decides to talk about something, we're going to talk about all of it, and I really appreciated that you did that, because it was very vulnerable that you dove in that deep and, stripped away so many layers of the situation for us to see it for what it is, because we need to see it for what it is. A lot of this stuff, the way that it's been presented to the public, has been sugar-coated, it's been sensationalized, and it's been very, very misrepresented, where people are more entertained by it and don't see it for the serious crime that it is, and because of the way that it's been portrayed in, Hollywood and these different, novels and stuff that we read. I think too, people, when they're confronted with the reality of it, they either can't accept that this is real and it's happening, or they're very easy to write it off as fiction because the way it's been presented to them. So I think it's really brave how you've decided to do that, and it's really appreciated. And I wanted to show your Substack. So one of the cool things that Jessica did, aside from putting together different articles that we've collaborated on together that you guys can find on my page and hers. But she also has her own Substack at Guided Healing. That is the name of her account and her, I don't know if they call it a channel or a page on here. But I'm going to show this for you guys. So do you want to talk about your latest article, Jessica? Because this is sort of a little announcement that we wanted to make for you guys, a little gift that we're announcing to you guys that she just literally created.
Um, yeah, this one's a bit of an exclusive. Um, it crosses into so many different spiritual territories that I didn't feel comfortable sharing it publicly. So I felt like it was a good way to, yeah, step into that deeper level of Substack, allowing people to support and interact with me as well. Yeah, and it's also that motivation to just keep writing, which I really love because, yeah, writing is such an important part of who I am and how I express. So
It's so
I'm
therapeutic.
that.
Yeah, and so on Jessica's page, and again, you can probably type in her name and it'll populate Jessica Kaitlin with a K. But if you type in at Guided Healing, and I'll have this linked in the show notes too, you guys can go ahead and find her through her handle. And she created an exclusive article. It's at the top of our page. Depending on when you guys listen to this, you might have to flow through a couple articles if she's written other ones, but it's called Removing an Entity Placed During a Childhood Satanic Ritual. And I'll also have the 3 articles that Jessica has so graciously written to be published on my Substack that we collaborated on. Amazing information that she went into on the articles that we did on my page. And like I said, the comments, people were very, very moved by Jessica's ability to articulate these really hard things from a pen to paper, or fingers to keyboard, I guess now we could say. But you're a brilliant writer, Jessica, and I'm really proud of you for putting this together. And it's cool that survivors are finding different ways to disclose. That's one way the internet has been really amazing, is it's allowed us a way to put that kind of writing and journaling into a way that we can share with people instead of it just being this private thing that we hide under our bed, you know? And so it's really neat that you have done that. And I have no doubt that it's been very therapeutic for you and for other people. But I would love if you guys went and supported her there. Reading is also another really great way. It's also super healing. It's a way for us to connect. And I think Substack's a really neat platform. You can have a community there. You can leave comments. You can have dialogue with creators. You can DM them. So it's sort of like a blog, but more mixed with social media, I think, than a lot of the other blog platforms that have existed prior to this. It's been a cool way to like build and meet people and have a community. You have your own feed whenever you're on there. You can share articles in your feed, and you can go, like and comment and interact with creators. And I'm seeing more and more survivors that are taking that as an outlet to share with people, because not everybody can get up and just do podcasts, or maybe that's not their way that they feel the most comfortable or the best sharing. Some people really enjoy writing as, a hobby and like it's an outlet for them. So I'm going to have that in the show notes. I would love if you guys went and connected with her. She has some incredible writings on her page. And then, like I said, I'll have the articles that we did together linked on mine. And before we get into sharing your testimony, Jessica, I know you had a disclosure of sorts that you wanted to just share with people, as we're going on this journey, telling your story about, what you go through whenever you share. And then I wanted to get into talking about the area that you, or I should say the areas that you and your family have lived and kind of, originated from. And we can sort of lay the landscape of where you're at, which is Australia, and the specific area where you are, and then we can sort of talk about the landscapes of Tasmania and kind of where your family has lived generationally as far as you've been able to put together.
So I guess, yeah, I wanted to start by disclosing that, like you said, I am still quite young and I'm going through a survival period in my life right now. So with the dissociative identity disorder, going into different memories requires me to switch different personalities to whichever parts of me were present for that time of my life. And sometimes in doing that, my brain might not want to cooperate, and I might just lose where I'm at, but I know Emma's great at helping bring us back on track. So we're gonna, yeah, trust the flow.
Yes, and believe it or not, that's so common. It's not just because of DID, just the complexity of sharing a lifetime of memories and diving deep into things that are traumatic and really hard to talk about. We're just going to dive in wherever we can, and we'll come back if we need to for air and just continue on. So I always take notes, and we'll always come back to where we were. So let's talk a little bit about Adelaide, and let's talk about some of these areas that might be a little bit unfamiliar to people who listen here in the United States or the UK, which is another big country that my podcast has been passed around to. And for people listening to on Substack, one of the articles that Jessica submitted that we did together, I'll just show you guys real quick if you guys want to check that out too, is called Adelaide, Australia's Underground Abuse. And she does detail a little bit about Adelaide here as well, as some of her own personal experiences. So that's another way that you guys can go check this article out and learn a little bit more about that. But I'll hand it over to you to talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, so I'm from Australia, and I'm from Adelaide, which is the capital city of South Australia. Um, it has a very interesting origin story in the way that most other cities in Australia were convict settlements for prisoners from the UK and other British colonies. But Adelaide was specifically designed by some very rich UK merchants and Freemasons that, yeah, collaborated together to plan the settlement of South Australia. And one of the guys involved in that, his name was Wakefield, and he is actually reported for having abducted a 15-year-old girl. And so this is the people that we had design our city. And yeah, like every main street in the city is named after a Freemason. The Grand Lodge was one of the first buildings built. They say it was the first, but who knows fully. The founding fathers had a very long history in being slave owners and human trafficking. And when they came over here and had access to Indigenous people, that ramped up a lot. And there was a lot of money made through the hunting. And essentially, they were selling them as artifacts after having killed them to other museums around the world as, yeah. So there's a lot of very dark history that is not really known by anybody in Adelaide, surprisingly.
You know what's the population there?
I think it's about 1 million.
Okay, so reasonably small. I mean, a million's a lot of people, but it's not, this like huge, massive city with millions and millions and millions of people. And for people listening
No.
to Rachel Vaughn, who has been on the show, that is where her entire story is whistleblown from as well. The events that she shares also occurred in Adelaide, and she has a long line of Freemasonry in her family as well that she's talked about. So for those of you listening that have followed her, um, some of these dots might connect you with, what she said and help validate that. That's wild that there's that much to where the streets are named it, and that was one of the first buildings, and that people there, like, that's not talked about or anything, or people don't seem, no.
No. I guess the experience of living in Adelaide is that it kind of just feels like a big town,
Okay.
or just like a very, very small city. Um, it's kind of where people say you go to retire. A lot of old people, not a lot of party scene, I guess you could say. It's not really for young people. Um, everyone's quite isolated and disconnected and very just we're one of the highest fluoridated waters in Australia. So it's evident in how people treat each other here. It's not the best.
Interesting. And so this is where you were born. I want to go back a little bit in your family history, and I don't know how far back you've been able to trace sort of this generational cycle, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you've discovered about your family and sort of some of the origins and countries that led your family to end up in Adelaide, where you were born.
So, my biological father's family, with which I experienced the abuse, they cut me off quite early because I started to speak out young. So only about 6 months ago was I able to find somebody else from that side of the family who's also left and to be able to start talking to them to actually start getting some information on my family history. So that has been absolutely wonderful because I've tried so much on my own without much information to see what I could find. And now I know that so my father's family is deeply connected to the Salvation Army, which, after doing a lot of research into that, has a deep rabbit hole and a lot of legally observed abuse in their children's shelters and orphanages and women's homes. When you begin to look into the way that their structure works, it's literally like an army. They have the full chain of command. And yeah, it's just not pretty. The more and more you read and the more I learn. And then obviously can see how that's trickled into my own family as well. There was a lot of, Christian language wrapped around the abuse to validate it. um, so my grandfather was from Tasmania, which is the small little island south of Australia. Um, his whole family was, yeah, Salvation Army, and he was married to his first wife, had two kids, and then had an affair with his underage babysitter, and they ran off together to Adelaide and began to just produce a ridiculous amount of children. I think in total they've had 13. Um, so I was then born to their eldest son when he was a teenager. My mother lived around the corner, and so my mother's side of the family also have their own history of abuse. My mother's told me different stories throughout her life of different family members. And yeah, so they met each other when they were about 17 and conceived me.
How old was your mom at that time that she conceived you?
She turned 18 a week before I was born, and my dad turned 18 the day after.
Okay. Wow. Oh my gosh. So they were just so young themselves. And so where in that family line, obviously there's the Salvation Army connection, and I actually wasn't, it makes total sense. I've heard about corruption around the charity aspect and like money laundering and like corruption on that side. I'm not surprised at all though at the other side of it that there's, abuse literally, built into this company, this charity line, involving, you know, trafficking and things like that. Like that definitely doesn't surprise me, but it's also really interesting because literally everywhere you go, even here in America, there's Salvation Armies everywhere, and we're driving by them, just like Freemason lodges, and they have this perception of like doing good in the community and that they exist as, a service. And it's just so disappointing to find out all these different companies are involved in all of this, but again, I'm not surprised. It's just how violent and sick that these things are literally like right in our own towns and cities, and we're driving by them all the time, and who knows what's going on behind the scenes here and what we're actually
Mm.
supporting. So that, I appreciate you sharing that. That might be helpful for some people. I'm sure there's a lot of people in that case that have potentially been abused by this charity. There's a lot of them. So
Mm.
as far as your family goes, were there connections to government, military, things like that? How did the sort of programming aspect intermingle with all of this? And when did that start, do you think?
So the day after I was born, my father actually disappeared to South Africa for a few months. He didn't want anything to do with me. It was his mother who wanted to be able to have access to me. When my mother went into hospital for labor, she specifically said that she didn't want this woman there. And somehow this hospital went behind her back, called this woman, my grandmother, and told her to come in and be there for my labor. So that is a red flag of what connection is going on there. Um, but then, as my mom was so young, she went and lived with her parents who got a job in Indigenous land up in Fregon, so just middle of the country in the desert. And I was honored to be initiated as one of the people of the land by the Indigenous community there as a 6 month old. So I was there from 6 months to about 18 months old. So it's been good for me to learn that and know that they weren't able to access me during that time at all. But after we returned, they had part-time custody. So every second weekend, I would go to, my dad's house, which was my grandparents' house that still had, like 10 children living there. And it was, very incestuous family. So there was just like constant like grooming and abuse happening just from kids that were my age all the way up till about 18. So it was normalized. It was very normalized behavior. Um, and then about 4 years old, I shared something with my mom about my uncle putting some nappy rash cream on me, and that was a red flag for her. And she took me to child services, and they confirmed that I had experienced some kind of abuse. So that gave my mom full custody. Um, so yeah, that was a really awesome thing that I am grateful for every single day, that I didn't have as much time in that home anymore. But obviously, she still wanted me to be able to spend time with my father. So whenever he did want to see me, that would happen. Um, they were more connected to the church than any sort of like military groups and stuff like that. It was, yeah, have the mask of being a good Christian, and go to church every Sunday and look like a good family, but behind the scenes be, doing the most atrocious satanic things that people can be doing. Um, it's only been through the years of recalling trauma and listening to other survivors and your podcast that I've been able to um, like identify what alters I have, so that I've been able to piece together what sort of programming was starting, because I have a lot of different fractures, a lot of different sort of like when they create that blank slate for a new alter to begin the trauma and the programming. I've got all these beginning inklings of all these different alters, but then very few have had much development, if at all. So I still experience all of this DID and all of this switching, but then it's not fully formed in the way that I see other survivors experience it. So I'm very grateful for the way that it's almost like I've been able to just dip my toe into this world and experience it in a way that I'm going to be able to understand other people so deeply, but also, yeah, I think that's why I've been able to maybe recall so early as well as, yeah, I wasn't in it as long as other people have been. And I'm so grateful for that.
4 years old, that is so young to have conscious memory to be able to go share with, a parent like how you did with your mom. And yes, what a blessing that she reacted the way that she did. So many parents on both sides of the family in a lot of these stories just ignore all the signs. There's no care and concern for the child. They're all aware of it and just let it happen. So what a blessing that you had such an early intervention or somebody at least acknowledge you, and be able to prove that had something bad happen to you by, somebody in the medical world that was able to validate that for you and for her. I think that's another thing. A lot of these doctors and stuff that are in these networks intertwine with these families and contribute to the cover up. When a parent does go and try to disclose, they just write it off, or no, you're just imagining it, or that didn't happen, your child's fine. That's really big that you were able to get something like that. Were you able to obtain medical records at all, or did your mother keep those?
I just remember it going to the police, but then nothing was able to eventuate from it because the uncle was underage at the time. He was 16. So nothing ever was able to really go through there.
Yeah.
But I think the reason that I shared it was because that didn't seem like abuse to me. After like what I've uncovered and seeing what was really happening, like to me, that yeah, that was aftercare. That didn't pass my mind as something that shouldn't be disclosed, but it was enough for my mum. And I feel like there had probably been a lot of other things and that she had picked up on. I remember her saying that when she hung out there when she was a teenager, that she saw like my auntie and uncle being intimate. So she'd already seen that there was incest happening in the house. Um, so yeah, I'm really grateful that she was able to get me out of that.
And so how did that work after they separated and your father still had access to you? Was there a certain schedule? Did you see him frequently? And how long or how often were you with your mom?
This is where it gets hard to remember because there was no routine to it. It would just be
Okay.
random times that they wanted me. And I remember them, like when I was 7 years old, they took me to Tasmania. And I have very, very few memories from that trip, and the flashbacks I do get are really nasty. So I know that there was still, I feel like my grandmother is from what I've also had validated from the family members I've reconnected with, that my grandmother is the puppeteer of it all in many ways. Um, yeah, the memories I did retain from growing up in that house were all so ugly that I honestly didn't even really need the satanic memories to come back. um, yeah.
Oh my gosh. So you had a lot going on in your life. You had young parents, first of all. So, I mean, they're so young trying to manage having children. Were you an only child in the family?
My mom got married when I was 3 and started to have, yeah, children with my stepfather.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so then this was in the middle of you being with your mom the majority of the time. You're seeing your dad on occasion, and then your mother's building this other family on the side. What about your father? Did he also remarry or start dating? Were there other children in your life on that side too?
Yeah, I remember going to meeting random people with him that when he was dating, he had another child 4 years later, with this woman, and I spent some time with them during that time of my life. Um, she also has DID now, quite terribly. Um, and then I think around 15, when I was 15, he got married, and that was maybe the last time I saw him was just before that. And I told him I started to remember something from my childhood, and he shat himself. And I told him just a very bare, basic story. Like I was 15, I had really not remembered very much. Like it was just something I had retained from childhood. And I was like, this weird thing happened. And he was kind of like, it's only that. Um, but he then said I wasn't able to come to the wedding, and I was, yeah, pretty much didn't ever see him again. I saw him one other time to meet his new daughter. Um, yeah, and that was it. But then I started to recall memories, and I'm really grateful for that.
And then what about, so his parents and sort of this other layer of dysfunction that he was born into with the grandfather that married an underage babysitter, had a lot of children. Um, what was that family dynamic like? Do you think that all of his siblings were being abused as well? Was all of that happening? Was your father sort of singled out, or maybe a couple of the siblings? What have you been able to piece together about um, all those children and that sort of family dynamic?
That I'm very curious about. My auntie that I've spoken to has definitely gone through a lot more of, I think, similar abuse. But then I think the uncle more just experienced like the psychological. So I think that they do have whether it's spiritual or psychological, like ability to see which children are going to be the best targets and most useful. Yeah, I think that maybe they realized with me pretty early on that I wasn't going to be the most useful, especially with how little time they would get with me. So I think that is why they probably gave up and haven't pursued like getting me back in any way. But I have definitely felt, that constant sort of spiritual attack and just difficulty everywhere I turn in life since. It's like everywhere I go, there's this just constant interference. So yeah, curious about all of it still.
Yeah, that seems to be a pattern with a lot of people who have gone through that, that it sort of follows you in some way, shape, or form on that spiritual level. And it can be hard to articulate that to people that, aren't aware of this happening. It can seem, kind of like an isolating thing that a lot of survivors, I think, go through because the rest of the world is so uneducated about all of this, as we were talking about in the beginning. And so being this young, you're going through a lot of family. You're going through a sort of a divorce or a split. Your mother is creating a new family. You're seeing your father periodically. All of that seems chaotic enough without the abuse, just going through so much change being so young. What was school like for you? Did you have memories going into school? Did you experience any abuse in school? Were you recognized in like gifted and talented programs? Different things like that. What was sort of that like for you getting into some of those a little bit older years where you start getting into school and academia and being social and things like that?
School was super difficult. So one of the issues of not having my DID being like well formed and programmed is that I don't have a solid front personality. And I would just like, there wasn't proper cues for bringing out other alters. It's just whatever would trigger it or just whatever in the moment. And I'd just be constantly shifting personalities. And when you're being raised, yeah, in the duality that I was of like one family, like my mom was very Christian. And then my father, participating in satanic things. It was just this intense duality of different personalities. And yeah, it wasn't pretty. Yeah, like a lot of ways I was abusing other people because I just didn't know that that was not okay behavior. So there's been like so many layers of like guilt and shame to work through, and just that constant reminder that you were a child, and to just hold space for that. Um, I pretty much never had friends going through school because I was just so unpredictable and causing so much drama. And I could never remember what drama I was causing because of that amnesia between the personalities. People would say I was doing stuff and I'd just be like, what do you mean? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. I wouldn't do something like that. Um, so yeah,
With the
school was a
rigor,
lot to navigate.
I bet. Oh my gosh, that sounds so, like I said, that was already enough going through so much change, like just within your family unit, and to compile that with all these heinous things that you're also experiencing and trying to, go to school and function as a child, you know, uh, a normal child, trying to fit in and have friends and do all this stuff with, and then go home and, all these really horrible things are happening to you. Did you ever have any adults that ever put together that maybe it was abuse, or did you ever have any outreach like that, or somebody that kind of cared on that level to actually try to figure out like why is Jessica reacting like this, or is there more to what she's saying?
Not really.
Oh,
I remember my mum trying to have me tested for autism, and they told her that it was PTSD, and that didn't really seem to change anything about how she treated me. I think just because of her and like being very Christian and very dissociated from her own trauma, um, I didn't get any support in that home. Um, it was always, if I tried to come to my mum with issues, it was just go to God, go sit in your room, go pray, go to God. So in one way that, created that foundation for me of having a beautiful relationship with God, but also, yeah, it was such a it's still a wound I have now, even, people being like, oh, well, I don't have space to physically support and hold you or be there because of what you've been through. Just go to God, just go to spirit, just go to a practice or a meditation. And it's like, I've been doing that my whole life. I just need a hug.
yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the things that people, reading between the lines is something a lot of people don't know how to do if they're not aware of what somebody's going through. And that's such an easy sort of band-aid to throw on somebody. Go to God, do this, do that. And it's like, but wait, like I have this inner child in me that just wants to be held, just wants to be heard. And like nobody is sitting here with me. That can be so isolating. And I can't even imagine how isolating that must have been so young, being so aware. I know you didn't have all your memories, but do you remember going through actual PTSD? Did you have reactions at home, or were you reacting in ways that looking back you're like for sure like I was screaming in the middle of the night, or I was having nightmares? Did you enact that outside of school too?
Mm. So one very interesting point of my life was in year 12, when I was 12, in year 8, um, they give you the option of having the HPV Gardasil vaccine. And that has a high level of aluminium in it. So that's a really heavy neurotoxin. And when that went into um, my body and my brain, it caused the fragmentation of my alters and all of those symptoms to like dramatically exacerbate. And so there was this solid period of about 7 months of my life before I was able to have like a strong heavy metal detox that I was strongly switching into like I was regressing into a 3-year-old child alter for like a month at a time. And I would not be able to remember people. I would not be able to recognize my parents because they looked older than I remembered. Um, and then, yeah, I would switch to other alters as well. And it was just, I remember feeling like I was just locked in the back of my head and just watching my life through like a keyhole, and that I didn't have ability to like yeah, take control of my body. And that's something that's actually continued throughout the rest of my life is this sensitivity to aluminium. So even if people give me some food that's been cooked in alfoil, it greatly exacerbates the DID symptoms and puts the amnesia walls back up. Even though I've done so much integration work with remembering trauma, it puts those walls back up. So that's happened recently, which is why my brain is has been struggling a bit again. But I just do a heavy metal detox and things clear up a lot. But that has been a very interesting thing that's just been a part of my whole life is navigating this whole health side of it because aluminium's in, like deodorant, it's in our water, it's in like so many different things. So it's, yeah, given me like getting damaged by a vaccine, even like that's a very early insight into the corruption of big pharma and all of these other different things going on in the world, and seeing how gaslit we were, going into hospitals, and my mum's like, this stuff's happening to my daughter, she's passing out, she's like having all these like issues because there was a lot of physical stuff happening too, um and they're just like, oh, it's just psychosomatic, and send us home.
Yeah.
So it was an
What?
extremely stressful time for my mum as well.
Oh my gosh, I bet. What were some of the physical symptoms? I'm sure you're not the only one who, has had that type of, I guess, poisoning in their body, toxicity. That might be helpful, especially for other survivors, if they hear maybe what some of your side effects were. A lot of people
Mhm.
have had vaccines, and like you said, this stuff is in our food products. It is in our water. There's chemicals literally everywhere, and I think it's a big overlooked part of what can possibly cause like destabilization, or like you said, maybe like losing grip on where you're at in your healing and like regressing a little bit.
Mhm. um so it essentially felt like it was just short circuiting my brain. So my nerves would be misfiring. I'd be feeling sensations that weren't there. Like my body was misinterpreting those readings. Like I'd randomly feel like I was being pricked and stuff, and that wasn't happening. I would randomly feel like I couldn't control certain limbs. I would get like rashes on my hands and my feet. I got what's called POTS. So if I was standing up or sitting up for long periods of time, my blood pressure would rapidly drop. And so you kind of would just pass out or need to lay down before you hit that point. Just chronic body pain, terrible brain fog, like permanent writer's block, like no ability to like, yeah, follow through with a train of thought. I couldn't understand people as well, like my ability to process words from others. If someone had an accent, Lord help me. Um, it was
Oh,
yeah, it does a lot of different things because it's a neurotoxin, and obviously that controls your whole body. So there's a lot of adverse reactions that it can do.
now, did your mom throughout these time periods as a child, as an adolescent, teenager, going into some of these like more formative years, did she or you have any idea that the abuse was continuing after your initial disclosure? Or did you sort of like internalize everything and then, she thought you were safe where you were going with your father and his family?
Yeah, I don't really remember my mum being super questioning about anything afterwards. Um, I think she just saw that I wanted to be with my father and just focused on that. Um, which, yeah, I didn't know any better. But then when I hit about 12 and that teenage angst started to kick in, it was like, wait, this guy's scum. Like, he's not even seeing me. Like, he's not even showing up as a dad. And he would always lie about why he couldn't see me. Um, so, yeah, that angst kind of helped.
Yeah, for sure. And so when you were seeing him, Um, what was that like? Were you going to his home? Like, was a lot of this abuse taking place at home or at your grandma's house? Were you off site? Like, what was that like when you were with him and what was happening?
From the rituals and things that I have like recalled and remembered now, I feel like they're such organized, specifically timed events. Um, so I don't think they bothered with me the rest of the time, but when they needed me for something, for their own gain, I'm assuming they would, yeah, bring me in for that. So it's like those trauma memories are like they pack it out so quickly. Like they're so organized in the way they do the rituals. They kind of just smash them out really quickly. Like it's not something they're going to spend a whole lot of time doing because that's riskier. So it's like, you do it in the dead of night, you just smash it out and then you disband. Um, so the times that I remember seeing him, it was like I just go, he was a basketball coach. That's kind of where I remember the core of the memories. Um, yeah, I don't know. There's still so much to recall from the childhood as well.
Absolutely. One of the articles that you had done on the Substack that we collaborated on was Halloween. So obviously, I'm sure it seems like he was asking for you, like you said, at particular times that probably appeared very random and actually were very random. Like he should have been seeing his daughter regularly, right? So it is like random when you look at it that sense. But looking back, can you sort of put together like a calendar of like, oh, like he wanted me on this holiday and this holiday and like this date that's on the satanic calendar and like you'd see a pattern that wasn't so random after all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we went to Tasmania for Easter. And then yeah, like the Halloween memory. Yeah, it's that's where it's annoying, like being when you're a child and then having my mum be dissociated as well. Like you just can't get answers to like when did he see me? Like I just don't know. But obviously, yeah, like those memories can give me clues to things.
100%. And so what was life like um for you growing up? Did you end up, I know you said around like age 12, you started to get into kind of that teenage angst where you're like, maybe my father's not like this great guy. But do you remember before that, like, were you always really excited to see him whenever he'd come? Did you have fear of him? How was like no. What about your grandma or anything? Were you just like, what did you think that your life was? I guess is what I'm asking. Like, what was that
Mm.
front story of like, okay, this is my life. Like, I'm so excited or I'm really scared. What was your childlike mind like viewing this whole situation? How did you perceive it?
Um, I didn't like my grandma. I always retained this memory of her punishing me by putting chili, like hot chili sauce, on my tongue, as a punishment, um, to silence me if I was saying things she didn't want me to say. So I knew I didn't like her. But yeah, I loved my dad. Yeah, I think especially because of, the abuse from him in that way, that it really did sort of like it really like incest does like kind of fuse together these neurons in your brain about like, love and intimacy and sexuality, all these things that are kind of meant to be separate all get like fused into one. So yeah, I had a deep love for him. Yeah, I had no idea.
Was he your main abuser on that side of the family, or were there multiple people that were perpetuating that when you'd see them?
Yeah, multiple. Yeah, because there was still all of the siblings living at home. Um, so yeah, that was just normal. Like I had an uncle that was a few years older than me, and we'd constantly be playing in the backyard, and that play was grooming and sexual abuse.
Oh my gosh.
Mm.
And at what age did you say that you had stopped seeing your father, or rather, he stopped seeing you?
Yeah, I think completely cut me like stopped around between 16 to 18 was really the last little drips of contact. And then I can't remember exactly what age. I want to say it was maybe 21, 22 when I was first starting to recall things. I was speaking to his other daughter, my sister, that he had 4 years after me. And she was talking to me about having remembered abuse as well. So we were just having this beautiful moment of being able to, yeah, validate each other. And so I messaged his new wife and said, hey, like me and my sister remember experiencing abuse in that, like in the grandparents' household. So please watch your kids when you're there. Um, and that is when, within a few hours, even my sister had to block me because her mum was getting calls that Jess is going crazy and everyone needs to cut contact with her.
Okay, so let's talk about sort of leading up to that. So, sort of those mid-teenage years, you sort of stopped seeing your father stopped seeing you. What was that like for you? And like, how did that affect you as far as what you were remembering? Did your body start feeling safer? Were you having trickles of memory before sort of this event happened where you're talking to your sister? Or what did that look like after that separation happened?
I was living out of home by the time I was 15, and like very much so by 16. So my thoughts were on survival and not on him at all. It was just getting through. But that is when flashbacks kind of started a lot more. And I experienced abuse in the homeless shelters I went through in that period as well. So that was another touch into Adelaide's underground. Um, so that kind of looking back, I'm like, oh, that's why I was so messed up during that period. There was some more stuff that had gone on. Um, yeah.
How did you end up talk about the period of being homeless and how you ended up there? Did you was that something that sort of you chose, like I'm gonna just like leave, or was there an event that happened that caused that?
So me and my parents were constantly clashing. Like, yeah, once I hit 12 and that teenage angst was coming in hormones. I just became, yeah, I just wanted independence, really, especially having like other alters that are wanting to go out and have certain experiences, but being in a very conservative Christian family, there was not much space outside of the school church routine. Um, and so, yeah, we were just clashing more and more and more. And at one point, they shipped me off to Darwin to live with another family because they were just so sick of me and didn't know what to do with me. I was being a little bit of a rebellious teenager, like not too bad, but I think the thing that got them to kick me to Darwin was I just didn't come home after school one day and I just went to the beach with friends from school and like we had some drinks. I smoked my first cigarette. And then it was like, yeah, kind of got dragged home. Um, and they were just like, nah, we don't want to deal with you. So where do you want to go? And I figured Darwin was better because otherwise I would still be able to, access the same circles of friends and do the same things. So that's where I learned very young that, changing your location doesn't run you away from you.
And at that
So
point, did you have more memories coming through at this point? Did you know that you were dissociative yet? Or was that still something that just kind of seemed normal to you because you were so used to dealing with it, but you didn't really have the vocabulary for it?
yeah, it always seemed normal. Yeah, because your mind's always like that way. So I hadn't thought that I was different yet.
Right.
But up in Darwin was where, mental health definitely started to spiral really badly and like the self-harm stuff kind of started. And just, I remember having this moment with the mum that I lived with and just breaking down and being like, I don't know what's going on. I'm drinking at school. I'm like having sex with my boyfriend. Like, this isn't me. Like, I don't get what's going on. Like, I'm cutting myself. I couldn't understand why I was like the way I was. Um, And then telling her that and sharing that with her, she the next day turned around and said, "You're going back to Adelaide." And she got rid of me. Um, so then I think I lasted another month or two back at my parents before we both just mutually agreed, like, neither of us want me there. So just left. I just walked out and made my way.
Were you still in touch with your mother, or have you been since then? Or was that just a severed relationship after that?
It's always been a tumultuous one. Yeah, we didn't talk for a very long time. After that, I remember many years later, I think it was her New Year's resolution, and she contacted me on the first day of the new year. Um, so yeah, like there's contact, but it's like we're not close, and I still don't get any support or validation from that relationship.
Which is so sad, like every single person that gets on the side of like freedom in a sense of just not being chained to that conscious control and not having your consciousness or like agency over your body. Like we all wish that every parent and everybody that are in these systems would want to reclaim that for themselves and like leave and heal, and go on a journey. And so many people like just can't face what they've went through and they'd rather just push it away, and not explore it and not sort of put two and two together about like their own children. A lot of the children that end up growing into adults that become survivors that leave, it's almost like they become the parent of like their whole family. Like they're the ones kind of like telling the family like what's going on, and the family's acting like children almost of like, no, like I'm not going to look at that and I don't want to deal with that, and it's really sad that how this stuff like really breaks families apart, and that's not talked about enough either. I think people on the outside looking in think, well, if it happened in your childhood and it's over, if that means you're fine now, like you just have to get over it kind of and move on, and that's all you have to do. And they don't realize like the collateral damage on so many different levels, emotionally, spiritually, in the physical world, relationship wise, just all the different ways that abuse damages right down to the root and core of relationships and parenting, and seeing how we have like these really damaged parents, like raising kids, like to think that your father's like participating in all this stuff and has access to children while he's doing it, his own children. And like he's putting his own children through these absolute horrors, and like nobody's stepping in to intervene. There's no accountability from the other family members of like, dude, what are you doing? It's all just like enmeshed within the very foundation of the family. And so that had to have been so difficult for you. I know you didn't have the memories right away of everything, but when you finally did, that had to have been really hard to contend with like understanding what your family was actually into versus, what you thought and like how the outside world was looking at everybody. And so I wanted to ask too, your grandparents and your parents, you talked a little bit about what some of them did for a living, but I wanted to ask like what did they do for careers and things like that? And you mentioned the Salvation Army. Did your mom have a job, or did she marry? Was she a stay-at-home mom and had support from her husband? Like what was kind of that aspect like of what these key people in your life did for work?
So mum was stay-at-home mum. Yeah, she had kids every 3 years, so she really stuck to that. Um, my stepdad is a computer programmer. My biological dad. All I remember is that he was constantly changing jobs. Um, Usually stuff to do with sales, so stuff that kind of he gets to use his silver tongue, I guess, to get away with what he wants. um, hmm. And a bit of background is like my mum was when she was 16, she was the best gymnast in South Australia, and dancing runs through the female lineage of my family. So my grandmother danced on TV. My great auntie was one of the dance teachers to the best in Australia.
Wow.
Um, yeah. Um, yeah.
So the public perception, people probably looked at your family like you guys were very normal. Like you said, you had the Christian element sort of wrapped up, covering up all the dysfunction that was happening underneath. You have people that are accomplished, sort of in the entertainment industry. I'll kind of loop that in sports. Was that kind of the perception of your family? People looked at it and thought, everything's normal. This is like a really great family, really great people. Or were there other people that were sort of, maybe could see through some of that?
I don't think people through saw through it. um, because like being in a church, everyone thought they were great, like both sides of the family. Like I started trying to find a church a few months ago, and Adelaide's so small that as soon as I share my name, they're sort of like, who are your family? And so I answer, and then everyone's like, oh, I know them. I know them. Oh, they're great. Oh, I used to let my kids go over and hang out with them. And I'm like, so then I'm quite triggered and just see that people have like no discernment. But also I get that people mask really well, but like I remember when I brought it up with my grandparents when I first tried to share with them some memories of, maybe people within the church not being super great. They're like, oh, we always felt that something was off. We just didn't know what it was. And I was like, okay. And then, cut to a few years later, my nana comes back around and she says, that stuff you told us, I don't think that was real.
You're kidding me.
Mm. Just a lot of cognitive dissonance in my family.
Yeah.
Because they're so Christian as well, I don't think they want to acknowledge that, yeah, this kind of stuff's been happening behind the scenes. And like, I remember like part of the grooming in like the abuse was, you need to do these sacrifices. Like, you remember the Old Testament? Like, we got to do these sacrifices because that's how you have miracles in the church. So the good things happen up there. We have to do these bad things down here. So it was very like interesting how they have wrapped that stuff around and yeah, use like religious programming.
Absolutely. Yes. And then they frame it in a way that the child accepts it because it makes sense the way that they present it. They present something really bad with a bow on it, and share like a story about it afterwards. Like you said, like they put on like, oh, good things happen in heaven if we do these things down here. So it's like they tie in these things that are like not true to make you accept the bad things that they're doing without question. What else do
Mm.
you remember about grooming? What other things you mentioned, like your uncle who was very close in age with you would groom you. What else do you remember that those family members would do to sort of desensitize you to abuse?
Um, like a lot of movies I should not have been allowed to watch. Um, I remember like one of those like little clicky camera things that have the little slides of pictures in them, the kids' toys.
Yeah.
One of them had like messed up pictures scattered in the midst of it. Um, I've remembered like more intensive sort of programming, like after going through a ritual, then being handed to my grandmother and um, kind of just like being strapped down. And I think like a whole lot of other kind of stimulating things going on. And her just like repeating, awful phrases and like just drilling in these different beliefs and phrases and programs and things. Um, yeah, I get lots of glimpses into things, like being tied up to a wall and stuff like that. And just, I think maybe because they didn't have a lot of time with me, they kind of just went straight to the more extreme of things in the moments that they did have. Because even, yeah, like I have so little memory of any of the time that I've spent with them. And yeah, like I said, the things I do remember are so awful in themselves that, yeah, it's still a process to remember the heavier stuff.
Yeah, and that's, the grooming process too. People don't realize like how deliberate abusers are. It's not just, hey, I feel like being abusive right in this moment, so I'm gonna go do it. There's like a very deliberate strategy to how they get children to accept abuse, to normalize it, to make it something that, the child, of course, there's dissociation involved. So of course, like, there's the amnesic barriers and the compartmentalized memory. But at the same time, when the child does remember stuff, it's really easy to even like you were disclosing at 4 years old and you could still just pack that up back inside of you, go to school, function, and not have it be something that like sat on you all the time where you're like, oh my gosh, this is so wrong. Like, it was something that you disclosed and then you accepted and just went on with your life, until you got older and were able to like look at it through a different lens. but it's really incredible, like the levels of, how many years they'll take to groom and desensitize a child and have all these different events lined up and all these different ways that they're presenting abuse, like I said, like with a bow on it almost, to get you to accept it as something that is normal, which is like really disgusting, that there's kids that accept sexual abuse and physical abuse and these just really terrible events that people like you and others have went through, as just, that's just something that we do as a family. That's just, normal. That's how you act with adults that love you. Like this is what love is. And it's really sad, because that has so many effects like later on in life with having to undo all of that and then learn how to be, functioning in an actual loving space and like having boundaries when it comes to abuse with partners that you have later on in your life and friendships. It kind of like strips down that 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 ability to have a boundary so much in your life with people. And so it's like no matter where you go, almost like you're allowing abuse because it's all that you know, which is really sad.
Mm, yeah. I think it's been, through learning so much about psychology and how PTSD shows up and just like understanding triggers, like even, understanding that I'm not going to be able to see the flashback, but I'm still experiencing this somatic trigger without knowing what it is. But then through sort of sitting there and observing, okay, maybe what triggered me then? It's like all these different puzzle pieces. And it's been able to, like, yeah, over many, many years now, it's like you're able to just continue building that puzzle and start to see more of the full picture.
And so I want to talk a little bit about that journey because you obviously remembered some stuff disclosed very, very young. I think it's amazing that you were able to, do that at all, understanding what you went through, that, you were able to speak out so young and have it be heard by somebody, that's really incredible. But like you said, you had sort of a period later on in your life where then you were disclosing to your sister and she's disclosing to you and you're putting together some puzzle pieces and of your own story, recalling other things. Let's talk about that period of remembering, what you were remembering. How is that, how did that affect you?
So first I had to like accept that I had DID.
Had you ever heard of
Um,
that before?
Pardon?
Had you ever heard of DID before?
No, so that's all part of the journey. Was I I think I was 18 and I went and saw the movie Split. And that was the first time I'd heard someone refer to dissociative identity disorder. So I remember Googling it and looking it up, and I'm like, I don't have this. I don't have amnesia. I'm like, but maybe I have multiple personalities. Like that I could get around. So I'm like, I wasn't fully resonating with aspects of the diagnosis because you don't remember what you don't remember, you know? It was hard to catch. You're really not meant to know you have DID. Like I think it's really designed for you to just not know. Um, so yeah, just being an avid researcher, I just sort of kept digging and just trying to find the answers. And um, I met this person and we started dating. And on our 1 month anniversary, we had some LSD together. Um, he had DID and he was aware of it and he'd already pegged that I had it as well. So during this trip, he's sort of sharing that with me. And because of being, on a psychedelic, I was able to sort of have this step back, look at myself as I was switching and see it all happening and not then have the amnesia. So it was like the trip for me was like, you have DID and like just integrating and accepting that. Um, so then I did. And then it's like, okay, well, from everything I've learned and read, that means that I have trauma that I don't remember. So I basically was just sort of putting that out there to God. It was just like this seeking and yearning from my heart to be like, I want to know, like, I want to understand because I'm so sick of people calling me crazy and not knowing why. I want to understand and heal myself. Um, yeah. So then maybe a year later, um, I was on LSD again. It kind of came out of nowhere. I went to pick up a friend to go to the beach, and then she said, "Oh, it's actually my birthday. Here's some LSD." So we had some of that, and it wasn't sitting with me super well. So I went home and just laid down, and I was just sort of massaging different muscles, which I do just from the chronic pain. But then because of the LSD, it was actually bringing up these visual memories that were being held in that part of my body. So yeah, I'd push on certain muscles and I would see different things that were happening. And obviously not all of them were trauma, like different body parts just held like different things. And it was a very interesting and cool trip. And it really like taught me very early, that the body keeps the score. And I remember getting to, the hip area, massaging around there. And I started to see my dad and a headboard banging. And I remember just crawling out to my housemate and just saying to her, "Look, I've just remembered this thing with my dad. I just need to tell you this because I'm scared if I don't, that I'm just going to repress it again." And then crawled back to my room and continued the journey, which a lot of people would call a bad trip, but for me, I'm like, no, I accept that this is what I've asked for. And I didn't push myself too far, but I still let myself, yeah, sit with it and explore what I had capacity for. Um, and then from there, it kind of, yeah, opened the gates where I guess sort of maybe every 6 months, just like new memories would start to just trickle back in. Um, and it was always quite a process of accepting. It's like, I guess, like other alters were like sharing it and they're like, well, they've experienced it, so they already accept it. So then it's like this process of other parts being like, okay, fine, I'll acknowledge that that's happened. Okay. Like, and it usually would take maybe like 2 weeks of seeing that flashback to like get to that place. Um, yeah.
Did your memories come layered with intensity, or did you sort of experience all the hard stuff at different times in the journey, maybe some in the beginning, some in the middle, some in the end? Like, were you aware that satanic ritual abuse was happening right away, or did that happen later on as memories were trickling in?
Yeah. So I started remembering in, yeah, 2019. And then it's just been a trickle of like getting progressively worse since then. So I guess the more capacity my mind and body feels that I have, the more that it's, yeah, increasing, which memories it shares. Um, so the more satanic ones only came through in the last 2 years, I think. Um, yeah.
How did you manage dealing with those
Emotion.
memories as they trickle in, like right from the first ones to even now? Like, what was that process? Did you take time to just like, were you working? Were you still trying to function going through these flashbacks? And like, how did you care for yourself during that time?
So ever since I was like a young teen or late teen, I've said that my full-time job is working on myself.
I love that.
Because I've just needed to. I've had no capacity for like doing other things. I've tried doing little odd jobs here and there, but it's just was too much for me. Um, so I remember at some point, I think it was around 2022, that I remember feeling God tell me that he'd had this protection from the emotional weight of all of it that he'd had over me. So up until that point, it was like I was just in intellect and I was just like, oh, that's what happened. That's what happened. Puzzle piecing it all together, the red string, everything going together. And but then, yeah, God's like, all right, now time for the emotions. Um, so that was intense. And I very quickly was like, okay, what are healthy ways to move emotions and express them and get them out? And that's when I started writing and painting, and trauma stories were coming out, and messed up paintings with, blood and candles and darkness were coming out. And it was just like more and more puzzle pieces coming together. And yeah, just more and more flashbacks over time. And like they're usually quite brutal, like when you're processing them. It's just sort of like, in a way, like your body's somatically like going through what it experienced then. So what I do in these moments is I surrender to that and I allow it, but then I do like a freeing of myself. So like, okay, I'm trapped like this, but now I'm like, no, I'm not. Like I'm free. And I kind of have like this moment of like being able to step back into my body and reclaim that authority over myself. And then other times it's just too much and it's overwhelming, and we'll just be like hyperventilating, and then the mind will be like, no, too much, and dissociate. And then I don't like being out of my body, so I'll breathe and bring myself back in. And then it's feeling it all still straight away, and it's like, no, so it goes back out, and it kind of just becomes this battle. So that's where, cannabis has been an incredible medicine for me, for just being able to help me relax and give me space in those moments to actually just process things in a much more gentle way than being really stuck in and thrown about by everything that my mind's going through.
Yeah, or even having to rely on taking a whole bunch of pills that can sort of layer on more symptoms, than what you're already dealing with the trauma. That's always something too. I get people that are like, oh my gosh, how do I know if my memory is real or not that I just had? And it's like, your body knows, like you can't fake a memory to yourself. Like if you have a dream, for example, and you wake up, like if it's like a dream that didn't happen versus, a memory that you can look back and be like, okay, this is something that I remember from childhood. Like it's very distinct. And like you said, your body will actually relive it and go through the same sort of pain and trauma, and you'll feel things in like the same place in your body that you actually experienced it in real life, which is actually really fascinating because that's not something that we're taught, and I think a lot more people have somatic memories that come up than they even know, even if they didn't go through something as extreme as you did. I think I always often wonder after learning about all this, how many people have pain that's like a memory screaming to them that they're not able to acknowledge because they don't have that understanding that the body does keep the score and that emotions are stored, somatically and integrated into our fascia and into our, body. And, that emotions don't just like leave. Abuse doesn't just leave your body after it's done. Like it holds on until it's acknowledged and it can be let go. So I think that that's really amazing that you were able to like understand that on such a deep level, sort of intuitively. Because a lot of people like don't even know that to begin with, and I love that you were able to kind of like sit with yourself and like acknowledge what it was and help yourself move past it. And so talk a little bit about your journey with cannabis. There's a lot of survivors that this has been a part of their journey, whether just like for a little bit of it, or that it's something that it's consistently stayed with them.
Mm. Yeah, I'm so regularly grateful that like weed exists, because I feel like from the experience I've been through, I could be addicted to so much worse. And I react to anything that's not natural. So I'm grateful for that being a deterrent from ever trying anything else, really. Yeah. Oh, it helped me so much. Like, I feel like I was quite manic most of the time, probably before I ever smoked it, because I would have just been like constantly switching and like ADHD and hyperactivity. It would have been an absolute whirlwind. So I just remember being able to chill out for like the first time in my life. It was just like, oh my goodness, I can actually just relax. And yeah, when life hasn't gotten like to a strong place of security and stability for me yet, I'm so grateful to have this thing that helps so many different parts of what I go through. Like it helps, if I'm wanting to just have one different person, like one personality be more at the front and have everyone else in the back just chill a bit more, like it helps do that instead of there being this constant like fight for the front. It helps with all the chronic pain. Like quite often, the physical ailments will, require a lot of rest, but my mind's so active that it's hard to like the marijuana helps bring my mind to a place that I can actually be okay to just relax in bed and still read and do things and study, but it's like I don't have to be moving.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm grateful that it hits like so many different places. Yeah, it's so helpful.
And there has been people that have had like adverse reactions where they're like, no, it suppressed my memories. Like, I'm not saying it is for everyone, but I think it's really interesting that, given what you and others have gone through, so many survivors are like so repelled by like really toxic drugs and things like that, that a lot of other people lean on whenever they're feeling in trauma. A lot of, and I know that can be a journey as well. I'm not saying, everybody doesn't go through like an addictive period at some points or like relies on alcohol or gets into hard drugs. But it's really interesting to me how sort of on the other side, most survivors that are speaking out either got past that or never went through a period like that because their bodies intuitively knew once they were able to like remember and like be in touch with their memories and like really get in tune with their body, like the intuitiveness to have a more holistic lifestyle seemed to like integrate more with that knowing than a lot of other people who are like very unconscious to like what they went through, or they're avoiding it, and so they cover it up with things that aren't intuitive because they're not like in tune with themselves. They're like pushing stuff away, where you and others are like embracing memories, and really looking into them and dealing with the way that they show up, whether it's emotional or whether it's physical, or even spiritual. And then it's like sort of what follows that is like this very organic way of healing, instead of relying on all these really artificial things. It's almost like your body kind of pushes that away and wants to lean on things that are a little bit more gentle on you, and aren't as harsh as some of these other ways that we mask things with. So I think that's really interesting, and I love that that's helped you. There's a lot of people that aren't yet comfortable to talk about that part of your journey. But I'm always interested to talk about these different elements of it, because it's just as important of like what we're putting into our body when we're healing, as it is mentally, like what we're putting into our brain, like what we're actually putting into our body, how we're treating the symptoms and the emotional trauma that we go through when we're healing. A lot can be damaged if we're eating a really crappy diet and being addicted to things that are not serving us in any way, and are hindering our healing in a way. So I think that's really interesting that you sort of fell into more of this holistic way. Was LSD also something, or mushrooms, like were psychedelics as well, a part of that healing journey for you? Or was that something that you only did a couple times and experienced kind of that spiritual awakening with it?
Um, yeah, it definitely helped with healing of actually getting back into my body and learning myself instead of kind of just walking around in this constant, dissociated state. Um, yeah, because it's a beautiful tool for self-reflection. And I think that's probably what a lot of people miss in this world. So it's so good to just be able to like, yeah, really sit there and learn yourself and connect to your body and just, a lot of the time it would be, at doofs, like just forest dances. So you just get that freedom to just to dance and be, and everyone at those events are, they're all the weirdos and everyone's just there to fully be free in themselves. And you'll see things there that you won't see anywhere else because people are just getting to wear what they want and just be so free and wild. And so that was really, yeah, a healing part of my journey there for a while, and just like reclaiming my body in so many different ways. Um, yeah, and I think it is as well, like the study into them being super good for like neuroplasticity. Like during that time, you are able to reprogram your brain. So sitting there on mushrooms or a little bit of LSD and just saying affirmations, like telling yourself truths, and just repeating them to yeah, reprogram away from all these lies that they've put in there.
After you started remembering and obviously becoming aware that you are dissociative and have dissociative identity disorder, how did you take the chaos that was going on inside that you discovered and sort of create cohesion within yourself? That's another thing I think people struggle with, and it seems like you have, gone on quite a journey with that in such a short amount of time. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that journey and how you've coped with having this in such a really amazing and mature way.
um I guess there was a point that I was trying to find like DID communities, like online and stuff like that. So I was getting to see how other people experienced it and just learning more. Like that's what I prefer is I like just like your podcast does so well. Like I want to go straight to the source. Like I want to know truly how people are experiencing it and hearing it from them. Um, so I guess yeah, I just dove for a few years into trying to learn what alters I had. So there's a lot of different tools I used during that time. There was this app called, oh, actually, let me get the name right because it's helpful. So the app's called Antar, Antar, and it gives you just sort of like a chat bubble, but you can put in different aspects of yourself. So like the way the app shows it's like you can have your internal optimist versus your internal pessimist. But for people with DID, you can just sort of have your different alters and allow them to have this chat space to just press, oh, this is the one talking, and just type. And I was doing that and just like, because I do switch somewhat easily, it was like just different conversations were coming out. And I was like, whoa, okay, we're learning a lot here. And it was so beautiful to see because, there would be parts that would come out that were so angry and borderline homicidal, and you'd then have this like beautiful nurturing mother part come in and just be like, hey, like I understand you feeling that way, like you've been through some stuff, let's maybe redirect this energy. Like there would just be like this beautiful nurturing, and like and then you'd see that part be like soften and be like, wow, okay. um and then I had an Instagram for a bit that was very private, and it was just a safe place for whoever was fronting to just post and share so that I could have it all somewhere I could look back on and figure out what was going on. So doing that alongside the remembering trauma, like it does just start to really disintegrate those amnesic barriers, and the integration was just happening more and more. And yeah, like I do feel that I do like switch kind of fluidly between different things, but it's like I don't overthink about it. I just let myself be.
What were some of the biggest challenges that you experienced going through that process of trying to create cohesion?
I guess I still get worried about seeming crazy. And I still have those moments with myself, like going back through that old Instagram and seeing littles coming up and having this younger voice and being dressed up all cute. And it's like, I cringe at myself. So there's like still like such a process of like acceptance. Um, I think mostly just because it's doesn't feel like it's going to be understood by other people. And yeah, I guess that's why I want to advocate for it so much so that people can understand and hold space for all of these different ways that DID shows up. Yeah, I found it, yeah, pretty hard in the way that I've done most of my journey very independently. Um, so I remember that, there was this one point that I had a little come up, and they were, a part that had held a lot of trauma, and they were really struggling. And I was telling them, I'm like, you're safe, you're loved, you're supported. And they're like, no, I'm not. Like, show me the people, show me this. Like, you're lying to me. So it's difficult in those ways. But then there have been beautiful moments that, we have that little angelic interaction with somebody, and you're able to like pull on those moments to be like, see, like there is some good, there is some love, like there is still hope in this world and good people, like just keep going and you'll get there.
What, in your experience, because this is something that you have been talking about more and you've been researching more, what do you think are the most misunderstood parts about DID?
Like that it's such a spectrum. Like everyone experiences it differently. So not like I don't know, I feel like some people that I know that have DID look at my experience of it and they're like, oh, I don't have it because I don't do that. I don't put on wigs and have different altars that dress up in front like that. Um, so I guess wanting everyone to know that it is, yeah, it shows up differently for everybody. And there is that amnesia there. So that quite often, yeah, you're not going to remember like those moments of when you're triggered and you go into that state when you come out of it. Because the way I think of it is like your mind's kind of just like a pie chart and you've got all these different little slices. And when you're in one slice, that's that's the piece you've always been. That's the way you always remember experiencing things. So then when you jump into another slice of the pie, like it's the same thing. You don't remember being that slice because you've always been this slice. So it's like you're still all one, but yeah, those amnesia barriers can make it difficult to recognize. So for me, a lot of it was listening to those around me who knew me and loved me and being like, okay, enough people are telling me that there's something going on. Um, I need to figure this out because, you know, healing, like we are responsible for our healing. We're not responsible for what they did to us, but we are responsible for our healing so that we aren't hurting anybody else.
Yes, absolutely. And speaking of triggers, and I don't mean triggers as in, somebody triggering a personality switch. I mean like just everyday things that could cause like an emotional reaction. How do you deal with those whenever they happen?
Breathing, deep breathing is the really big thing. Um, and then just learning different like nervous system regulating techniques and tips that come up. Usually just because I follow a lot of psychotherapists and stuff on Instagram. So I've got a good algorithm for just being shown all of these little strategies on just because our body does have like little biohacks. So like one that was super helpful is like when I have an anxiety attack, just squeezing and holding there for a bit and then doing that on the other wrist and then just holding yourself there. And that somehow like will just stop an anxiety attack. Um, so yeah, little things like that. Um, it depends if it's like a new flashback or not, because it really is like when you first get a new flashback, it's got such a big intensity. And the more you work with it over time, the more you sit with it, like the less intensity of that trigger over time. Um, yeah. And then it's a very different journey between, you know, just having somatic triggers and not knowing why, and then being at the point of your journey where you see why and you know why, and you're actually re-seeing those memories and having to process that kind of trigger. It's a whole nother kettle of fish.
What else have you done on your healing journey that has been really helpful? You've already mentioned a lot of things. Are there things that you didn't talk about yet that worked for you, that you continue to do, that you've tried that were really great? I love providing just resources for people. I know everybody's different, but it's beautiful to be able to give people tools that they can potentially try and add to their own toolbox.
Mm. Dressing up actually surprisingly was one. Like allowing these other parts of you to express themselves, and then like that for me was like it's allowing space for them to have the front time, because you know that is a big part of healing, is allowing these other parts of you that don't get the time at the front to come up and have good experiences, or be able to express what they've experienced, or just process and just be. um I've tried so many different things over, like, I just constantly dipped my toe into all of these different places to see what works, because there is so many different healing techniques and modalities out there. And I think that's almost part of the fun of the journey, is just finding what works for you. So I know that being in like not that I fully liked this new age spiritual community, but there were, spaces where you're singing together and you're dancing together, and there's this beautiful love and connection like that was really healing. And yeah, journaling, drawing, painting, just finding different creative outlets to help get it out of you. Because I truly found that doing the writing actually did get it out of me a lot. Like it's like, okay, I don't have to keep trying to process this because it's out there. It's on the page, it's on paper, like it's out. Um, hmm, yeah, probably like can try to remember more over time and do another episode going into some things. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And how was this received when you started remembering? Obviously you had a sister to corroborate some of this with, who was very validating for you. How was the reaction of other people in your life when you started sharing maybe bits of your story or sharing, parts of your past? How was that with family and friends?
There's very few people that I've had that have stuck with me for long enough periods of time to be able to have those kind of close friendships to sharing those things. The ones that I do, it was yeah, beautifully received and um yeah, so grateful for those people that I feel safe to, like the friends that when I first wrote those trauma stories, the people that I was like, hey, I've written this thing, like, can I share it with you? Like, so grateful for those people. Um, but then I find it difficult now. Like I'm jealous in a way of people that do remember later because they've already been able to set up their lives. They've already got their marriage and their family. They've, done uni, they've got their career. Like usually because that front personality is probably a bit better put together. Um, and then they get to start remembering, But for me, it's like if you want to get to know me, you're gonna get to know a lot of like messed up stuff. And not many people want to do that. And so it's very difficult to make close friendships. But yeah, I got a few people here and they're my little treasured gems.
And I know that you mentioned you recently connected with a family member, an aunt who sort of left the family how you did in some way, shape, or form. Have you had any other validation from family? Has family turned you away after learning that you remembered? Like, what was or have you told everybody in your family? What's that journey been like trying to, face this with the people who did it to you?
Um, I've never faced anyone in that side of the family about it. Because they cut contact with me so well. And then my mom, like that side of the family, like they'll acknowledge aspects of it because they experience parts of it from me, but the the deeper reality, like the satanic stuff, like there's no room for acknowledging that. Um, but yeah, and then with my auntie, like these new parts of the family I'm reconnecting with, um, I don't know how much they remember, and it's like I don't want to just trigger them too soon. Like I don't know where they're at on their remembering journey, and I don't like I'm because just sort of law of attraction wise, like I've always had people around me that have DID. So I've learned how to be so tactful in what I say to people because especially from how much I've learned and been educated from your show and other resources, people that have it can share things about their childhood that I'm able to see as red flags and connect dots that they can't yet. So it's like I'm yeah, so gentle and like I never ever want to push anyone's journey before that, like, our minds and our bodies share it with us when we're ready. And I don't ever want to push somebody. So it's a lot of just loving people for where they're at and just witnessing. And I guess we'll find out over time where they're at.
That's beautiful. And I think that is like a big part of this. I look back on my own journey and learning about this and like how it's transformed me and having the knowledge of what the depths of what this is and how it affects somebody. My initial reaction, I see it a lot with people now that are starting to like wake up from it that didn't go through it. It's all like grab your pitchforks and like let's go kill all these people and like just like this hate-filled rage. And although that's validated, I think like we should be emotional and mad that this is happening. These are also family members. These are people who went through hell and didn't ever get out of it. They're just stuck in like this eternal hell, and some people never get out of it. They're born into it and they die going through this horrific life of like no love and no compassion and no trust and no nurturing. And I don't think people can really comprehend that, and they don't think about it that way. And although we shouldn't excuse the behavior, of course, like this is crimes being committed against you and others, and that equally has to be acknowledged and dealt with, but one of the things that I think is really beautiful that we can learn from people like you is how to acknowledge that crimes have been committed, but also not just write it off and persecute it without trying to understand the underlying foundations of it and why people do these things. Because it's not just
Mm.
children aren't born like I'm gonna go, sacrifice children whenever I get older and like, be a pedophile. Like they're
Mm.
corrupted by having crimes committed against them too. And so I
Yeah.
think it's so beautiful that like so young you've been able to learn a lesson that so many adults now, old and young, might not ever know in their entire life and like certainly don't know now. Like they don't have any grip on how to have and hold space and that type of empathy for people, while also being able to acknowledge that there's wrong, but being able to also try to ask like and try to contend with, what a person went through to be able to grow up to be, somebody that does these things.
Mm. So, they say like people fear what they don't understand. So to me, that means learning, trying to understand so that we're not fearing something. And that's for me where that reconnecting with Jesus and God has been such a saving grace for me, and that like that spiritual protection and that armor of um yeah, against fear, because it is true in the kingdom of God there is no fear. And it's like to keep asking God for that, to just keep like walking in that relationship, to, yeah, remembering our authority over that spiritual realm, and that we do walk in that protection.
Did you go through a period at all in your healing? I know you grew up with maybe deep Christian foundation just because of the way that you were raised in a family that, went to church and, you were introduced to Christianity very early on in your life. But when you started remembering the other side of the story and how sort of religion was used against you, did you go through a period at all of struggling to trust God and Jesus or struggling to maintain that relationship? And what was that like for you? How did you overcome that?
So that first LSD trip I had that showed me about having DID, another thing that I felt like it did was break Christianity for me, which I think something LSD probably does for a lot of people. It's like, whoa, there's a lot of spiritual world, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. So for me, I remember just feeling like, the that Christianity was the fishbowl inside the ocean. And I wanted to, I don't know, for me, it felt like Christianity had been shattered, but I knew that I'd experienced something. I knew that there was more. I couldn't believe just the atheist, there's nothing. And so I just kept seeking and learning and absorbing information from, I feel like God just led me on this little like breadcrumb trail through all of these different experiences. So um yeah, where were we going with that?
Did you have any trouble maintaining that relationship and like how did you overcome those trials of like trusting?
Mm. yeah, there was so many different like chapters with it. But I remember I think it was around 2022. Um, the my baby daddy was getting into Christianity and starting to read the scriptures, and I was getting really triggered. And I knew that, a trigger is a place for healing. Like, I don't run away from my triggers. I'm like, okay, if I'm getting triggered, it means there's something here to look into. So I remember writing a letter and being like, dear Yeshua, like, how could you let this happen to me? Like, I just let loose. And it was just like, yeah, was not happy with him. But then had, this image then drop in so strongly of like when he was getting tortured and killed and getting hung on a cross. It's like he was also, tortured and persecuted by religious people. So it was, just this instant being met and then just softening of being like, oh my God, like, yeah, you went through worse. um, so like, yeah, I think it kind of started from there, of just, yeah, reconnecting. And then, life has been such a roller coaster for me. So there's, those moments that I forget, but then it's like in those moments that you sort of go into the darkness and you re-find that little lost piece of yourself, and you're able to bring it back, and God meets you in all of these different places, and it's like strengthens that relationship, like, because I've been to hell and back so many times, and it's like God's never left me, and it's just cemented, like it's just made that relationship stronger and stronger to see that, when I've had attack against me my whole life, yet, God picks me up every time. Like, there's so many points of my life that people are like, how did you get through that? And I'm like, God, no other answer for you, because I could not do that. It has to be God.
Do you have any advice for people who are going through that struggle right now of like teetering between maybe their former beliefs and then being torn away from that, realizing how it was used against them?
Remembering that it's personal relationship, like, I think sometimes just stripping away all the doctrine, all the religion, all of the other like teachings and experiences we've had with it, and just coming back to your personal relationship, like understanding that there's this infinite creator who made everything, yet still loves and knows you so intimately, and like wants that relationship and wants you to have peace and love and purpose, and, fulfill all of these things that we're running around searching for. And yeah, it's a beautiful feeling. It's like a big hug when you just allow that.
That's beautiful. I love hearing these journeys and how people come back because it can be really, really tumultuous to, have everything you ever learned in your life in a second, you have to question everything and realizing how something so beautiful, like a spiritual relationship with God or whatever it is that somebody believes, can be just shattered in a second, knowing that there were adults that should have been using these, the Bible and religion and using these things to serve and better the next generation, and instead they're using it to abuse them. So I always love to hear these stories because I think it gives hope to people. There are a lot of people that are contending and struggling, battling that middle line between what they thought they knew and then, realizing that they were abused with those things that they were trusting in. I'm so happy and proud of you for overcoming all of that and being able to get to where you are today, because you can tell that you have like just this really solid ground that you stand on now. It's not faulty anymore. And I'm sure that that was like a really difficult journey for you to get through. And as far as I want to talk just a little bit, I'd love to have, I think that this is a really important topic, and maybe we could bring you on again and talk a little bit deeper about this. But you are a mother, and I think like what a wonderful, opportunity to break that cycle, and to be able to gift that to your child. And I just wanted to ask just about motherhood and how that's changed and impacted your life.
Mm. I feel like it grounds you so much into yourself. And it's just been so many blessings. Like, they teach you so much. And like one, like the sense of responsibility and purpose is very helpful, but also just that time that you get to melt into the inner child and you just get to be present and in this like all these joyful moments of like, seeing the world through their eyes. And yeah, it is so beautiful to be able to raise a child knowing that they're not going to have those kind of experiences. And I remember before, like the night before he was born, um I was it was just this whole thing, but I was meditating and I could feel the fear, like just that my womb would have been holding, and then just probably fear that a lot of souls have of being like, you being human. Um, but I sat with it and I just comforted him and I was like, look, I so understand your fear, but I promise you nothing like that is ever going to happen to you. Like you are so safe and protected and you're going to be so, so loved. And after that, I was like, all right, I'm going to go to sleep and I'm going to have my baby in the morning. And it's
You
exactly what
knew.
I did.
Really? Oh my gosh, what a story
Yeah.
that is. That's amazing. Have you shared that with him?
Um, no, he's only 4, so maybe when he's a bit older, yeah.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
curious, like if he will, have some type of a remembering about that or come to you one day with a memory and be like, I had this really strange memory of, speaking with you before I was here and like having these nerves and like you soothed me. That would be a really cool moment if you guys got to share that.
That would be.
It would be
Mm.
neat to maybe do an episode where we talk a little bit more about parenting. I think that's a really important thing. We have to learn how to be better as adults with, protecting kids. And, I think survivors are such a beautiful like segue into that conversation because you guys have seen the worst of the worst and like you know, what red flags are and, what bad parenting actually is and lack of parenting in a sense. So it'd be neat to hear more kind of about that journey, but I just look at you and I'm like, gosh, your son is so lucky to have you as a mom, and what a beautiful gift that you get to give, that he doesn't have to go through what so many in your family on both sides, went through to different degrees and kinds, and he doesn't have to experience what you did. So that's really beautiful that you get to gift him that and that you get to gift the world with who you are today and with what you've overcome, and that you get to now pass the torch on. You started your learning with studying other people and watching interviews, and now you're on the other end sharing and being able to give that gift to other people. And I wanted to bring something up that you had showed me, because this little girl is so proud of you. This little girl is just beaming. Like that smile that she has in this picture is for you. Like you grew into the adult that she didn't have and the parent that she didn't have. And this cute little girl, I cannot believe, you look at that little smile and just like nobody'd ever guess like what you were going through whenever you were so young, and that you had like no safety net really. And just to look at who you've become today is just incredible. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and to say this little girl, this inner child of yours, like is just beaming. Like that smile that she has right there is for you.
Thank you.
And you were so cute. Look at you. You're still so beautiful. Um, but I wanted to acknowledge that, and I'm just so proud. It's really beautiful, like watching you grow and blossom and, become a leader in this community and somebody who can now, take everything that you've learned from other people and like be able to like be that beacon of light that you saw in so many people whenever you were struggling. So thank you for spending time and like going through all of this with us. I know it's really difficult. Were there things or anything else that you wanted to talk about today that we didn't get to?
No, I'm feeling good. Yeah.
That was amazing. And so again, I want to share again for people who might not have clicked in the beginning. I'm gonna have it all in the show notes, but I know that there's probably people that really want to support you. And how can they do that? Where are you at on social media? And let's just remind people of your Substack again too.
So my Instagram is guided healing 111. So I feel like that's probably more for anyone who's in Australia or Adelaide that is recalling anything and just wants a safe place to reach out to more than a public forum about my life, that would be the Substack, which I think is also called Guided Healing. Um, yeah, so that I will be posting more of the trauma stories and, just life experiences that go alongside that on here.
And like we said in the beginning, there is an exclusive article that she just wrote on here that I'd love for you guys to go check out and to go subscribe to her. I think this is really amazing how now we're able to use technology to do so much healing together, and that we can come together on these different platforms and express ourselves. And, what was that app again that you mentioned too earlier that had the little bubbles?
Antar, Antar.
Okay, maybe too, I'll try to find that and link it. That might be really helpful for people too. And that's actually really neat. Instead of just journaling, you found a way to do that, from your phone or computer, from wherever you can, log on to it. So that's pretty helpful too. But I just honor you, Jessica. I can't wait to have you back on again. And I'm just in awe of you and like watching your journey, and can't wait to watch you continue to grow and to see how God uses you, and to, watch where your journey takes you to next. So thank you so much with all my heart for coming on today.
Thank you.
And again, for everybody listening, I'm going to have her links in the show notes. Please go support, share her articles, go subscribe. If you do live in Adelaide or around that area and you want to connect with her, survivor to survivor, her Instagram she mentioned earlier, go connect with her there. That way you guys can maybe corroborate and connect locally, which is always good. So I'm going to have all that below, you guys. Please share this episode if you can. These episodes are just so healing. They're so beautiful, and they're just so needed in the world. We need more of these authentic conversations, more people coming together and sharing the hard times and how we overcame them. And this was a really beautiful episode that was really centered on that. So please share this with anybody that you know that could benefit from it. Please subscribe. I'll have all my links below as well. Follow me on different platforms if you can. And thank you guys so much for listening. God bless you, and we will see you next time.